Welcome to my American History Notes, where I talk about my conclusions from reading and studying American history. You may not agree with my conclusions, but at least you should know about the subjects I talk about, and you can look them up yourself and do your own research to satisfy your curiosity. Hopefully, you have a curiosity about American history, especially if you're an American. So, up until 1638, there were four great settlements in New England: Plymouth, 1620, Massachusetts Bay, 1630, Hartford, 1635, and Providence, 1636. Dr. John Clarke came as a physician, a medical doctor, to serve in Boston. He arrived in Boston in 1637 with separatist tendencies and beliefs defined it in a religious upheaval. There had been a law enacted in 1636 forbidding citizens to belong to churches not pre-approved by the magistrates. This is in New England. John Cotton, the hero of the dissidents in England that had come to America as pilgrims, was a drawing point for many people from England who were unhappy with the political and religious situation there. Among these were John Wheelwright, William Hutchinson, and William Dyer. John Wheelwright was to be a preacher in Braintree at the Boston Congregational Church, following Reverend Cotton's example, as Cotton was the undisputed spiritual leader of all New England. Wheelwright took things too far, according to some, including Governor Winthrop, in his practice of what Cotton called, excuse me, quote, experimental religion, and was called an opinionist. There was a great deal of debate between preachers and politicians over doctrines and biblical truth. Much of the main point was a debate among the Reformed church members about how a person can know they are saved. The opinionists were labeled antinomian, or those without law. They were accused of expounding too much on grace and therefore preaching licentiousness. Those on the other side were labeled legalists and identified as orthodox. Soon it was clear they would win even if John Cotton wasn't on their side. The Orthodox, who controlled the civil authorities, looked to attack home Bible studies, which they believed were the source of many heresies. Many Bible studies took place at private homes around Boston at this time, because unlike today in America, these early Americans took their faith very seriously in a real active sort of way, looking for a fiend to blame things on. Authorities found Anne Hutchinson. She was bright, attractive, and articulate, and was conducting ladies' meetings in her home with her husband's approval, and she was primarily a supporter of John Cotton. The court wished to make an example of her, and she was accused of having a masculine spirit, denying the resurrection, and threatening subversion of the peaceable order in government. Those are all quotes. John Wheelwright, her brother-in-law, entered the fray and preached a famous sermon called The Covenant of Grace, which supported the opinionists, calling the authorities the enemies of Christ. Now, he also became a target of the authorities. Winthrop wanted him banished. Public opinion was against such action, so his court hearing was delayed. During this delay, Winthrop created an ordinance against keeping anyone in your home as a guest for more than 3 weeks. John Cotton threatened to move out of Boston because of this unwarranted intrusion into a private home's business. A synod, or religious council, was called by the deputies, and in 3 weeks of meeting, it condemned 80 errors in belief, few of which, if any, actually applied to the opinionists. Wheelwright's trial was moved again, not just in time, but to a new town called Newtown, by the way. There was a great political turmoil at this time, and it is a long, complicated story, which you don't have time for here. But let me just say that the outcome was the 1637 banishment of Wheelwright and Anne Hutchinson, among others. Dr. John Clarke then led 18 families to New Hampshire in the winter of 1637-38 to avoid the controversy in Boston. After some travels, they landed at Mr. Williams' abode, and he suggested they look to the island of Aquetneck, which they did in the spring of 1638, purchasing it from the Indians and renaming it the Isle of Rhodes, being told that it was out of the jurisdiction of the Boston court. Meanwhile, John Cotton decided that it was not in the best interest of his career to be known as an opinionist, so he switched sides. The Massachusetts enacted a law requiring a compulsory tax for paying the salaries of preachers of the standing order, that is, the government-approved clergy. The general population had no vote on the tax and no choice in choosing the ministers. This marked the first time within America that a local government made it so that there was taxation without representation, which will be an issue later with regard to the mother country. The banished believers under Dr. Clarke's leadership signed the Portsmouth Compact and founded the city of Newport, and founded the first Baptist church in America in 1644. there. However, John Winthrop talks about these people having a church at Aquidneck as early as 1639. Many historians credit Roger Williams with founding the first Baptist church in America in Providence. However, this church disbanded in 1638, and according to John Callender in his Historical Discourse of Rhode Island, that it was understood that Dr. Clarke's church was the first Baptist church founded in that area, and that Williams' church was not considered to be either be Anabaptist or Baptist. In James M. Wilmart's The Diary of John Comer, he says of Clarke, and it's important for Clarke as his part in our history of religious liberty. More than any other man, he is entitled to be called the founder of the Baptist denomination in America. His large participation in the public and political affairs of the infant colony was rendered necessary by imperative circumstances. His fame was not equal with his merits. It is hoped that his fame is not equal to his merits. It is to be hoped that future historians will do him fuller justice. Disputes leading to the founding of Rhode Island were purely doctrinal over the assurance of salvation. In other words, how does one know they are saved? The dispute would continue even to 100 years later, when congregational minister often claimed by Presbyterians as one of their own, Jonathan Edwards, an Anglican churchman and one of the leaders of the Methodist movement, George Whitefield, in the Great Awakening, would raise a furor over it up and down the Atlantic seaboard. With the publication of the greatest English Bible, called the Authorized Version, the advancement of printing, the Bible was getting out amongst the public in greater numbers than ever. Crates with the written word of God arrived for sale and distribution in New England. The country was about to take off with God's written word readily and cheaply available. The New England divider became the subject of infant baptism. Immigrants like Thomas Paine read the Bible, realized there was nothing in it to warrant baptizing a baby, and in 1644 refused to allow it to happen to their own child. Arrested and hauled before the court, and still refused, calling infant baptism an anti-Christian ordinance. As a result, Paine was whipped at the public whipping post with 20 lashes. Governor Winthrop said Anabaptism increased, spread in the country, which occasioned the magistrates of the last court to draw an order banishing such as continued obstinate after due conviction. Howard Knollys came to preach in 1638, but was driven out by the authorities and preached in Delaware, where a large number of Welsh Baptists had taken root. Samuel Gorton prompted the Boston Court of Deputies to not only invoke banishment, but order death for his followers. He founded the Rhode Island town of Warwick in 1644. Boston's religious tyranny helped supply the population of Rhode Island. Meanwhile, Roger Williams set sail for England by way of Long Island, where he ran into a Native American uprising which killed Anne Hutchinson and her children, who had moved there after the death of William. When Roger Williams arrived in England, there was a struggle in Parliament against the king, and this strife helped Williams get his colony's charter for self-rule, called Incorporation of Providence Plantation, signed. While there, he published his treatise against the Massachusetts government called The Bloody Tenet of Persecution. John Cotton was incensed by the accusations and wrote a counterblast called The Bloody Tenet Washed and Made White in the Blood of the Lamb. Williams countered with The Bloody Tenet Yet More Bloody. I kid you not, and I'm not making this up. Truth is stranger than fiction. Soon an invasion of books entered the New World, and many rejecting infant baptism for liberty of conscience. And we'll stop there today. It's been a long one today. A lot of things I wanted to say. Thank you for watching. I hope it gets you to study American history. If you find I've made a statement of fact that's wrong, let me know. I really appreciate it, and have a great day.